good to see everybody here today. And if you are visiting with us this morning, listen, we mean this sincerely. You are our honored guest, and as this slide's going to say, until I get this clicker out here, you have a place where you're always welcome. No matter what you're going through in your life, no matter where you are in your life, you always have a place to come. You always have a place to go where people care about you, who want to pray with you, who want to help you, assist you, guide you to God in any way possible. So if you're visiting with us this morning, welcome. We're glad you're here. Gina, have you heard anything from our two travelers yet? Is everything going okay? Outstanding. Amen. Let's keep praying for Anthony, and David Morris is there in Guatemala for more than a week, I think. And we have another group of people going off to a mission trip as well. Matt Welch, who I don't see here this morning, and myself and my daughter Rachel, we're going to be leaving Tuesday morning for the Dominican Republic. We're going to be there for about a week. We're going to go down and do a vacation Bible school in 2 towns. We're going to go to a hospital and visit some sick people and try to bring them some cheer and joy. We're going to have a work day on the property of Manna Global Ministries. We're going to have a community day where we go out into the community and help some families do some household chores and just spend some time with them. So pray for us as well. Pray for no Zika virus or dengue fever or malaria or typhoid or any of that other stuff that we're going to be dealing with down there. Getting ready for this trip was hard for me. I had to go get shots, and that's hard for me. I don't like that. I started taking a medicine yesterday for malaria that says, on the instructions, it says, if you throw up after taking this, wait an hour and take it again. And I'm like, I don't know. If I took it once and I threw up, I'm not sure I want to take it a second time, right? That's not what I have in mind. But there's a lot of hard things about this trip for me. One of the hardest things is I got to change my routine for a week. I like my routine. I like my rut. I like getting up in the morning, getting my bowl of Raisin Bran, going to my office in my sweats, and starting my day, right? Coming up at 9:30 for my mid-morning snack, and 10:45 for my second mid-morning snack, and I like to end my day on the couch watching a baseball game while I fall asleep. I'm not going to be able to do that, right? My rut is going to be disrutted. I'm going to fall asleep to the sounds of, swarms of mosquitoes and Matt snoring across the room from me or something. So, I don't like change. I like my rut. But listen, when change happens, you have a couple choices. You can either adapt and change with it. You can resist change. You can dig your heels in and say, I ain't doing it. You can ignore it. You can pretend like it's not happening, but guess what? Change is going to happen anyway. Things change. That's one thing we know is certain and constant in life is change. In 1877, something happened that changed history forever. What happened in 1877? Anybody? Thomas Edison invented the first phonograph. He changed the way we listen to music forever. Now, there were other devices made by other people that could record and play back sound, but his was the first that you could record sound and then reproduce it over and over and over again. You can kind of mass produce music. And it changed the way people listen to music. His original design was this cylinder with tin foil wrapped around it. You'd record music onto that foil, and then you could use that foil to reproduce the music you just recorded. That was pretty cool. But it didn't stay that way for very long. It changed in the 1890s when a guy named Emil Berliner initiated this transition from this cylinder shape to this flat plate kind of shape, right? That had grooves that ran from the outside to the inside, and the music was somehow imprinted in those grooves. What some of us would call a record album, right? He changed, again, the way that we listen to music. And over the years, this concept of the record player changed. It put out better sound quality. Stereo sound was introduced. And then after that, more bigger and powerful and clear speakers were added to it. And then it even permeated into, look at this next picture. How many of you had one of these in your school? Yeah, I see heads shaking. And all the young people, and they're like, What is that thing, man? Oh. Record players were cool, and you could play records at 3 speeds. What were the 3 speeds? That's right. And what was the most fun you could do with a record that should be played at 33? Play it at 78, right? And again, the kids are going like, why would that be any fun? Because that's how Alvin and the Chipmunks came from, right? That's how they discovered them, right? The record player changed the way we listen to music forever until the mid-1960s, when a new and exciting technology burst onto the scene that would change the way that we listen to music forever, and it was the 8-track tape. The 8-track tape consisted of an endless loop, a continuous loop of a 1/4-inch magnetic tape, and it was encased in this hard plastic thing, and you shoved that hard plastic thing into your tape player, and music came out. It was amazing. You could actually skip through songs by hitting this neat little plunger on the top of your very stylish-looking tape player. And if you had one of these tape players and you had 17D batteries, you could listen to music for about an hour, and you could take this thing anywhere. It was portable. Now, they tried to make portable record players, but it never really caught on, but this was portable. You could take it anywhere. And you know what? You didn't have to worry about your records getting scratched, right? You get a scratched record, you throw it out, right? You get a bad needle on your stereo, you got to go buy a new one. You didn't have to worry about that with 8-track tapes. These things were amazing. They changed the way we listen to music forever until the 1970s, when a new and exciting technology burst onto the scene, which would change the way we listen to music forever, and that was the compact cassette. Oh, this was a godsend. Compact cassettes would come in 2 versions, and this is what was really exciting. You could get pre-made tapes, right? You could go buy a tape of Frank Sinatra, or you could buy a blank tape and record on it. You could put your own music on it. You could make a mixtape, and for you young kids, that's a playlist, okay? You could make a mixtape, and it ushered in the era of the Walkman and the boombox. Well, you call it a boombox, but if you grew up someplace else, what'd you call it? Ghetto blaster, that's right. That's right. And the bigger your ghetto blaster, the cooler you were, right? I went to school with a kid whose ghetto blaster weighed 78 pounds. You carry a ghetto blaster 78 pounds like that for a while, you're going to be seeing a chiropractor. I mean, it was a status symbol. These cassette tapes were great. You could make your own music. They eliminated 8-tracks. 8-tracks were done reel to reel, gone. This changed the way we listen to music forever. That wasn't until a new and exciting technology came out called the compact disc. Now, these discs had been used for years in all kinds of scientific applications, but the music industry found a way to use it and commercially exploit it to get music out to people. And these discs were great. You could skip through songs, you could reverse songs, you could do all kinds of stuff. And you know what? You never had to worry about your CD player eating your mixtape, right? That's happened to you, right? You put your cassette in the thing and you hear that, and you pull your tape out and half the tape is still in the cassette. That wouldn't happen anymore with these CDs. These things were great. These things, and I mean, if you listen to music from the year 2000 on, you listen to it on a CD. It changed the way we listen to music forever. That was until an exciting and new technology burst onto the scene called MP3 players. They changed the way we listen to music, well, until the iPod came out, right? When the iPod came out, that changed, well, then the second generation came out of the iPod, and they changed, well, 4th generation and 6th and 7th and 8th generation iPods all. And now, who uses an iPod anymore? How do you listen to your music now? We use our smartphones. We use our smartphones now to listen to music. Maybe someday they'll just embed a chip in your brain and they'll beam the music right into it. None of these new and exciting technologies changed the way we listen to music forever. They were good for their time. They were great for their time. Every time this new technology came out, we all applauded and said, oh, that's the greatest thing, man. Over the last 139 years, the way we listen to music has drastically changed, and it will continue to change for years to come. But listen, just because the way we listen to music or how we listen to music has changed, it didn't necessarily mean that the music changed. Now, music has changed over the last 140 years, but It wasn't because of the technology, right? Here's what I'm trying to say. If I wanted to listen to Frank Sinatra in the 1960s, I'd listen to him on an 8-track, right? If I wanted to listen to Frank Sinatra in the 70s, I might use a cassette tape. In the 90s, I might use a compact disc. If I wanted to listen to Frank today, I'd use an MP3 player or an iPod. But did it really matter how I listened to it? Did I change Frank? Frank is Frank, man. I don't care how you listen to Frank. Frank is eternal. He's everlasting. He's Frank. And just because I listen to him on a different medium doesn't change who or what Frank is. When there are changes in our world, like the way we listen to music, you can pretend like the change ain't happening. You can ignore the change. You can resist the change. But I'm going to tell you, when you go to the mall to find the latest release of Justin Bieber on an 8-track tape, you're going to be very disappointed because you've become irrelevant. Listen to what I'm saying. You've become irrelevant in the way that the world listens to music. Irrelevant. We live in a world that's constantly changing, whether it's how we listen to music, whether it's the way technology impacts our lives, whether it's changes in our societal norms, whether it's changes in how our laws impact our lives. There are so many changes going on around us that if we don't find a way to adapt and change as well, we will find ourselves irrelevant. And that is even doubly true when we start talking about how we do church. How we do church. The manner in which we conduct our Christianity. If we in the church don't recognize the changes in the world around us and adapt to those changes as well, we're going to end up just like those companies that used to make 8-track tape players. We'll be irrelevant. You know, one day the people that were making 8-track tapes woke up and no one was buying what they were selling anymore because they had become irrelevant. That's what will happen to a church as well. If we don't recognize change, the world will stop buying what we're selling. And we'll die. Now, when we start talking about changing things at church, that's when people get real uncomfortable, right? Change, you know, I got uncomfortable when I had to use my kids' hand-me-down iPods to listen to music because I liked my CD player. Little changes like that make me uncomfortable. When you start talking about changing things at church, that's when people really, really get uncomfortable. Because when people see changes at church on how we do church, they start to feel like we're changing what church is. They think if we go from an 8-track to a CD player that somehow we're changing Frank. Some people think that if we change how we do things as a church, we'll change our message. That we'll change our faith somehow. That somehow, instead of transforming ourselves from the world, we'll conform to the world if we change how we do things. Listen, this is the fact of the matter. As a church, we have to change how we get our message out to the people. A message that never changes. How do we get that out to the people? The means and the methods and the programs that we choose to undertake have to reflect the changes in the world around us, or we become irrelevant, and people won't buy what we're selling, period. They won't get to hear that unchanging, everlasting, eternal message that we're trying to sell them. I've seen too many churches, and I've been part of some churches, who they step back and say, hey, listen, because I have the gospel, because I have the good news, I don't have to change anything. I've got God on my side. I've got His message on my side. So you know what? I'm going to keep doing things the way I do things. And you know what those churches all have in common right now? They're either dying or they're dead. Because they weren't relevant anymore. Show me a church that's growing. Show me a church that has real impact on the lives of people. Show me a church that's actually planting the seed of the gospel in the hearts of people, and I'll show you a church that was willing to step back and say, we got to change the way we get the message out. A church that didn't hold on to the old ways of doing things just because they always did them that way. These are the churches that said, hey, let's scrap the 8-track player, let's get an iPod. Let's scrap door knocking and pamphlets and church revivals under a big tent out front, and let's have an internet presence, and let's offer divorce care in our building. Why? Well, because we looked around at the world, and the world around us, everyone's on the internet, and oh, by the way, divorce is a major issue in our society, and that's where we can help. We changed how we get our message out. We're not changing the message. We're changing our method. But to become a church like that, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be able to look at ourselves and everything we do, look at it critically, and we have to ask ourselves this question: is it still relevant to the people who we're trying to assist and the people we're trying to influence? Are we still relevant to them? We have to look at everything we do. And if what we are doing or how we're doing it doesn't meet the standards of helping people, influencing people, bringing people to Jesus, then guess what we have to do with it? We've got to scrap it. We've got to scrap it and move on to something new, something that produces the results that God expects from us. We've got to be honest, but you know what? We can't be too proud to say, you know what, I think we've been doing it wrong for a lot of years. We've been wrong in what we're doing. We've got to change what we're doing. And I'll do whatever it takes, and I mean whatever it takes, to fulfill our purpose. Now, if you're one of those folks sitting there in the church this morning saying, you know what, I really don't think change is necessary, let me remind you what Paul wrote to the Corinthians about change. I'm going to read this passage to you, and sometimes because it was written thousands of years ago in a different society, in a different context, sometimes we don't get the full brunt of what he's really saying here. And I'm not going to go into it all this morning, but suffice it to say, when I read this scripture from Paul, it tells me that Paul was willing to make dramatic and impactful changes to himself on how he did things so that he could get the unchanging message of Christ out to people. Look what he says here in 1 Corinthians. He says, to the Jews I became, or I changed myself, to be like the Jews to win the Jews. I myself am not ruled by the law, but those who are ruled by the law, I became like a person who is ruled by the law. I did this. Why did you do it, Paul? Why did you change yourself? I did this to win those who are ruled by the law. He goes on to say, to those who are without the law, I became like, I changed myself, to be a person who is without the law. I did this. Why, Paul? To win people who are without the law. I became weak. Why did you change yourself to be like a weak person, Paul? So I could win the weak. And finally, he says, I have become all things to all people so that I could save some of them in any way possible. I do this all because of, why did you? Because of the good news. The good news drove Paul to do what? Change. Did he change the good news? But he said, because of the good news, because I have such an important message to take to the world, I'm willing to change how I do Paul. Are you willing to say that this morning? I'm willing to change the way I do Greg. You willing to say that? I'm going to change the way I do Cheryl. We're going to change the way we do Edgewood so that we can be relevant, so that we can be successful. Of course, the anchor sentence of this passage, and it's one of my favorite passages in the Bible. I said it again. I have become all things. I have changed everything so that I can reach everyone, so that I can save some in any way possible. Scrap this, start something new. Change. How important is it that churches change how we do things? If you ask that question to Paul, I think he'd answer you by saying, how can you do church and not be changing and adapting and looking at your audience and looking at the people that you wish to save and changing to adapt to where they are in their lives and to walk with them? Look, we're getting close here at this church. We're getting close to starting a new chapter in the story of this church here in Mansfield. We're going down the path of trying to select the right person to come here and minister with us, a person who will coordinate and guide us and lead us in how we do church. Once we find that right person, I got to tell you, everything better be on the table. There can't be no sacred cows. There can't be any pet programs that we're going to grandfather in. Everything has to fall under the microscope of, is it relevant? And if it's not, we got to scrap it. But you know what? That sounds kind of negative, but there's a positive to this too. When you start this new story of this church in Edgewood, it also means that there are no new ideas that are too big. There are no aspirations that are too lofty. You know, if you're one of those people that have been sitting there for years saying, hey, how come we don't have a program like this and such that they do over there? How come we're not ministering to these people right now? Guess what? It's on the table. This is the perfect time to put it on the table, to say, why don't we do this? Why aren't we doing everything in every way possible to reach as many as we can? I was just talking to a brother last week after service, and he came up to me and said, hey, have we ever had or do we have a program like this and such? And I said, you know what? To my knowledge, we never have. Maybe it's time that that program gets put on the table. Isn't that right? Now is the time to put it on the table. Now is the time to reshape ourselves, to retool ourselves. Now is the time to get that training, to embrace some training that we need so that we do become relevant to those people in the world that we're trying to reach, that we're trying to influence for Christ. We've got to be, and that's going to be my word for a while, I think. We've got to be relevant in the lives of people. Because if we're not relevant, we can't help but be relevant because our message is too important for us not to be relevant. We have an eternal and unchanging message. That Jesus bore our sins so that we could be clean. That Jesus died so that we might live. The message that Jesus took our punishment. He stood in our place. And that all we have to do is to accept him in baptism, to be washed in his blood. That's good news. That message does not change. How we get that message out needs to change. It needs to change. And that's the message that is offered to you today. It's a message of love, God's love. It's a message of expansive grace that God has for you. If you need to respond to this message this morning by putting him on in baptism, do it. Change the way you do you this morning. Change the way God sees you. Become what God has always intended you to be. Perfect in his sight, useful in his kingdom, relevant to the people that you live with. Let's add to the church those who should be being saved on a daily basis. That's our role. That's our job. If you're an 8-track tape player this morning, change. Change how you do you. Open up your mind. We're not changing what we believe. Our message stays the same. Always will. Let's change how we do church. All right? Hey, let's all stand together and sing.